Does Latanya Amerikanski?
8 years of obstructionism from the GOP. Congress's approval rating is less than literal shit. And all that got them all three branches of government.
All right, well, a sober welcome to Owls at Dawn, post-election shenanigans. We are just two dudes from Southern California who studied philosophy, politics, and religion around the world and decided to start a podcast where we could bullshit with impunity. I am Austin Hayden Smith.
And I'm Troy Polidori, and I'm kind of wondering if we should change our podcast name to Owls After the Apocalypse, or Owls After the Great Dawn.
Owls After Trumpocalypse. Oat.
Yeah, okay, that's the end of apocalypse talk on here. We're done with morning. It's time to move on to the future, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's why it is Owls at Dawn, right?
This is the dawn?
This is the dawn.
I know it gets darkest before the dawn, right?
So says The Dark Knight.
I think that was Aaron Eckhart that said that, right?
No, I meant the movie, The Dark Knight.
Oh, yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, Christopher Nolan taught us so.
And the one line of dialogue that was actually memorable, perhaps, from that movie.
No, then there's the one where they talk
Not said by the Joker.
Okay, you know, what was the one? Doesn't Michael Caine say, like, if you stare into the abyss long enough, you see it staring back at you, or something like that? Was that Michael Caine? Or Michael Caine when he's talking about, like, how you kind of have to become the very thing that you hate?
Yeah, I guess, like, ripping off
Nietzsche and shit.
Yeah, like random aphorisms you saw on the back of, like, a milk carton. Yeah, that's not terribly impressive.
Okay, fair due. So why don't you tell everybody what happened with last week's podcast?
So, this is episode 16, which if you're paying attention, you saw when you downloaded this or started listening, which makes you maybe wonder, where was episode 15? Well, we did a live chat with a few friends of ours during the election on Tuesday night, hoping to have like a sort of post-mortem as far as how things went down, what we can look for in the future. And given the fact that Tuesday was a like unmitigated hellscape, it ended up basically just being us being completely bewildered, having no idea what was happening, wondering if we were dreaming, and then mourning the end of the world. So it wasn't terribly informative, but it was fun. And there's some things in there that I'm sure if you go back and listen would be interesting. But it's kind of mired in 7 hours of just complete randomness. And our guests were great, and they added tons, but it wasn't the most structured sort of discussion. So in that case, the episode 15 is available on YouTube. You can find it. I'm not sure if we'll actually link to it. Maybe you can like Easter egg and try to find it. But the reason why this is episode 16, this is episode 16 because 15 is just out there.
Exactly. So with that said, let's get into it. As always, we start off with the shitty minute. Now, I feel like after an election, you could just have a shitty hour, and but that's not what we're going to do. We're not going to have a shitty hour. If you want to see that, just go to Twitter or look at a lot of late night talk show hosts or all of the day after and 2 day after mainstream media hosts and all of their shows that where they were just kind of, you know, freaking out with their jaws on the floor. Those were all shitty minute type of segments. But what we're going to do is we're going to do a regular shitty minute. And this week it's Troy's turn. So Troy, what is your shitty minute?
This was a tough one, man. I thought about giving the shitty minute to every different facet of media out there, to comedians, network comedians on late night TV. Mm-hmm. I thought about giving the shitty minute to us for not taking Trump as seriously as we probably should have. I was thinking about giving the shitty minute to almost every actor in the past 2 weeks in the public scene. And yet I came down to the fact that the one thing that I feel like deserves a huge amount of blame and is not going to receive it from probably any circle is the Constitution / federalism in general as inscribed by the Constitution. 8 years of obstructionism from the GOP. Congress's approval rating is less than literal shit. And all that got them all three branches of government through literally trying to destroy government on purpose. And everybody realized it. It was so bad the public even knew they were doing it. And they got rewarded for it because of how American federalism works. The state controlled the voting process. the Voting Rights Act, being struck down by the Supreme Court, all being added into that, part of the judicial branch's powers. We saw North Carolina, for instance, where a lot of the voter suppression was happening, ends up swinging towards Trump, and in many ways swinging the early parts of the election. The Electoral College itself, the irony that you read the Federalist Papers, the argument for the Electoral College, we talked about this even a couple weeks ago, right? Was that you keep a sort of lever there that's available to the higher hierarchical institutions to stop a populist candidate who's bad for the country from being elected. The Electoral College is there to do that. It literally did the opposite. It just gave the populist candidate the presidency, even though he lost the popular vote by, it's going to end up being millions of votes once all of California is counted. And that's even let alone the fact that votes in California basically don't matter compared to votes in North Carolina and Ohio, and even sometimes smaller states, which is just ridiculous. Democracy means one person, one vote. And then you add to that the fact that third parties in our country, because of the lack of a parliamentary system, all they can do is obstruct. So you have well-meaning people who, I know people who voted for the Green Party, and if you're in California, it doesn't really mean anything if you vote Green. But if you're in Florida and you voted Jill Stein, what the fuck are you doing? And yet, I still understand why you might want to do that. If a person voting their conscience can end up making the worst thing for their conscience happen, that's something screwed up about that. And that's, again, just inscribed in law. And so what are we going to do about it? We just accept that it's the way things are, even though it's an absolutely constructed reality. It's hard to understand why these things are the case. You feel me?
I feel really shitty after your shitty minute, Troy.
Can we have a constitutional convention?
And just rewrite certain things? I'm sure the conservatives would love that.
Let's just do it over again.
Just do it over again. I'm game.
Yeah. Just reboot. They did it with Spider-Man like 6 times. Why can't we do it?
I love it. The amazing Constitution of the United States.
Andrew Garfield is president.
On that note, let's get this shit going. Let's get into the main segment, eh? All right, so I'm not really sure how this discussion is going to proceed exactly, because there are many things that I'm sure Troy and I could talk about, want to talk about, but we are going to talk about, I guess, our thoughts and the fallout and the implications, and maybe do a little bit of some sort of analysis as to explain what happened, and kind of think about, not like on a popular level like has been done to death over the last week, but I'm sure at a more theoretical, abstract, and conceptual level as to why we have the president that we have. So Troy, how do you want to start off?
Yeah, I think that we're obviously not here to break down the science of polling and where it went wrong and do a postmortem analysis of that or anything. That's not what we're good at, let alone it's been done a million times already, and you've seen articles everywhere about it. But the theoretical level, the discussions about how to understand and conceptualize what exactly happened has been really interesting, I feel like, because it's extremely fractured, especially in the left, trying to figure out exactly what happened. It still feels surreal, in a sense. All expectations were completely thwarted in a way that I don't know that we've ever really seen on the political sphere. So I think the first question I kind of want to ask is, just in terms of thinking about the ideology behind the Trump voter, and specifically the Trump voters, which really swung the election. I know it swung the election. Literally 20 things swung the election. Could be explained as the deciding thing. It was that close, right? But it seems like a major factor, the unexpected factor, is the white working class voter who voted for Obama in 2012 and then voted for Trump in 2016. It's difficult for me to comprehend how that's even possible. And like, other than like life-changing realities like your whole family dies or you think aliens abducted you or whatever, what could change your thinking and your values so much to make that a reality? And yet in Wisconsin and Michigan and Florida and some of the places that really swung the election, it seems that was one of the biggest things. You also have, Black and Latino voters didn't come out for Clinton the same way they did for Obama, which I think in retrospect makes a little bit of sense. Like, we get that charismatic leader, he's going to attract more people to come out in that sense than Hillary is. I get that. But the white working class stuff, it's a little harder for me to understand.
Okay, let me make a simple dichotomy or a simple separation. It seems like it's one of these two options more likely. Either voters who did vote, like the individual and then conglomerate that voted for Obama in 8 and 12, switched and voted for Trump, or Trump was just simply able to mobilize a group of individuals who maybe weren't even a part of the electorate in those years, whereas Hillary was not able to mobilize them. So Trump was able to mobilize the white working class, whereas Obama, just like Obama was in 8 and 12, but Hillary was unable to. Not that individuals swung their vote. What do you think?
Yeah, certainly it seems like, I mean, I don't remember what the data was in this, but wasn't white turnout greater than the last election?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, so certainly you could explain that as a lot of it had to do with greater turnout, which a populist candidate is going to get greater turnout. That's kind of what they're banking on, right?
Right.
And also that, and maybe it speaks more to Clinton not being Obama, basically, more so than voting for Trump on purpose. It still seems like there's enough there that there's got to be a significant portion of people, maybe that even didn't vote in 12, but didn't care about politics enough to vote in 12, and now they feel like this is something that they can get on, or they hate Hillary enough to just do anything to make sure she's not in. There's a lot of that there. The white working class, I know people are questioning if there even is white working class right now, and the logic of that term. Well, maybe we'll discuss that a little later, but that seems to be kind of the major factor here, right? They were supposed to not have any significance anymore in electoral politics. That's all we were saying in 8 and 12, was that the demographics don't lie, and white working class people basically aren't going to mean much anymore, and they just owned an election.
Yeah, it's all women and minorities, right?
Yeah, except for the fact that white women voted Trump.
Yeah.
I don't think you can go down that road.
Yeah, I had a colleague today, actually. She's Irish, mind you. And she said, white women voted for Trump 53%. And her jaw just opened. And she was like, what the fuck is wrong with you guys? I was like, yo, I don't know, man.
So here's the inevitable question, right? This is everyone seems to be discussing on Twitter and on the I don't know, the op-ed-erati, if you can call it that. Is the white working class going for Trump, and especially even white women going for Trump, a result of economic anxiety, which is the line of, obviously, Trump supporters, and even some on the left, like our friends over at Jacobin magazine, or is it racism?
A white lashing, like Van Jones said.
Oh, as opposite of like blacklash?
Yeah,
or backlash?
Instead of backlash, did you hear him? He said that right after it happened, he said that this was a white lash. And that was kind of, he got, memed because of that. So it was that little sound clip from just after the election where Van Jones said that. So, yeah, a white lash or a genuine economic fear.
So, and by genuine we mean, and this is what the stakes are, economic anxiety is a rational fear, right? It's, I'm voting for what I think will be best for my economic interests. It's understandable, and you can talk about it, and you can debate it, and you can question whether or not their beliefs are correct about their economic anxiety, right? I mean, if you think that people voted for Trump because they think he's gonna bring coal jobs back, you can show people like that, look, he's not going to be able to. Solar and wind are already cheaper than coal, even without subsidies at this point. So it's not going to happen. It's impossible unless you destroy the economy by instituting all sorts of regulations and tariffs and protectionist policies. It's not going to happen. And maybe they refuse to believe it. I don't know. But it seems like you can at least address that in a rational conversation. Racism, at least as it's being described in this dichotomy, this polarization, isn't obviously rational. And so you can't discuss it. You can't address the person as a rational human being who you can have a conversation with. You just have to condemn it.
Right.
And then move on. And that's what the stakes are. Is this a phenomenon that can be dealt with, that can be discussed, that can be negotiated over? Or do you just condemn it and move on?
Whew. And then maybe the third option, maybe it is so ideologically irrational towards the economic side of the divide, So it is based on economics, but it's based on an irrational fear or an irrational understanding of economics, an ideological bias towards the master's tools, i.e. capitalism, and therefore the inherent crises that come with capitalism, the precarity of the domestic workforce, outsourcing jobs to the global south, et cetera, that those things, you can't even analyze them because you're so ideologically blinded by your own sort of wedded ideological connection to this economic market ideology. So maybe there is a sense of irrationality in the economic motivation.
Yeah, I mean, like you're talking about like Chicago school economics and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I just think that generally speaking, in the United States of America, there is a market ideology that dominates the way that people view economics. I mean, capitalism is king in so many ways, right? Not just in terms of how the actual economy works, but in terms of the ideology about how people think that they think about the economy. Not that they think about the economy, because most people don't fucking understand anything about the economy, but how they think about the economy is conditioned by a sort of neoliberal or liberal, or some people are talking about like post-liberal now, but like some sort of liberal capitalist market ideology. And I don't know that you would be able to have a rational discussion with someone who feels economically disenfranchised because maybe they lost their manufacturing job, or they perceive to have lost their manufacturing job, or they see these jobs shifting to the service sector, and they feel displaced. Maybe they are displaced, but maybe their feeling of being displaced is more irrational than anything else. Maybe their experience of the economic woes is more of an irrational fear than it is a rational point that you can actually engage with them on. Yeah,
I think to kind of go with that, you think about how Michigan ended up kind of swinging in a way that no one expected, right? I know Detroit was overwhelmingly Democratic. But you think about in the last 8 years, I mean, we had the auto bailout that Obama enacted, right? Against a lot of external pressures. And it was a rousing success for Michigan. I mean, lots of people have to credit Obama with saving their jobs, right? In the biggest industry in that state. And yet it swung after that. Like that's, and a lot of that, is to blame for Clinton for not really even going there and pointing that out. I guess, didn't Clinton like not even go to Michigan and Wisconsin, just assuming last 6 months that they were fine, so we'll just leave it. So they let it slip between their fingers. A lot of it's the Clinton campaign was just horrible in every possible way. But that certainly tells you maybe there's a little bit of, there's got to be some ideology behind that, to think that things are going to get better for you in going for Trump. It seems much more like a protest vote than anything else. Similar to the Brexit idea. Right? I don't really want to leave the European Union, but I want to punish the establishment.
Right.
And so this seems like the best way to do that. Yeah, I read that story about it was just one anecdotal story, but this one woman who's like, I voted for Trump because I want to punish the establishment. I don't want him to ban Muslims or send my immigrant friends away or take healthcare away from my kids who have Obamacare. I want none of those things to happen, and I really hope he's bluffing, but I wanted to punish the establishment.
Wow.
And I was just like, oh my God. That was exactly the same as the stuff you heard after Brexit, with all the voters saying, I thought no one would do this, and so I did it as a protest vote, and now look what happened. Can I take it back?
Huh. I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but I wonder if there is the same sense of voter guilt that you saw after Brexit with the Trump vote.
It doesn't seem like it, does it?
There's
a lot of gloating going on out there.
There's a lot of gloating. Yeah, I haven't seen it, but I hadn't heard about that story that you just shared, so I didn't know if there were other things that I just wasn't privy to. I don't know.
I mean, it's out there, but it seems like more of a minority thing than Brexit was.
Yeah.
There's just a lot more people that wanted either Trump to be president or anybody but Hillary, and they're happy with the result.
Yeah. Well, one other interesting thing though is there wasn't the immediate economic or the immediate market fluctuation, the negative market fluctuation domestically. International markets obviously freaked out, but domestic markets have actually been soaring. And I wonder,
guess which industries?
Oil, energy, Yeah, but maybe that's why, because, in the UK, domestically, the pound, sharp decline. Now, obviously, it was going to freak out and then it was going to rebound a little bit. But I think people saw how impactful their vote could be on their real material means of subsistence, and that freaked them the fuck out, Whereas here, there hasn't been that jolt or that shock. And so we may get a delayed experience of that, especially if he really does initiate these tax cuts that he's talking about, which will then only deepen the divides of inequality, which will then only deepen I won't say deepen, but it will weaken aggregate demand in the United States, which will then create all kinds of other issues, job stagnation. We're going to continue to have low interest rates, which are good in some ways, but which can also be a sign of weakness and things like that, as the central banks are trying to sort of manipulate spending and to make sure that we don't just completely shut down and stop buying and spiral out of control. So they have to use quantitative easing, where they're injecting capital back into the market by lowering interest rates, maybe going to negative interest rates. Who knows what's going to happen? Who knows? It might take a long time for for people to feel that material effect at an economic level. But they definitely didn't see the sharp, immediate economic effects like the Brexit campaign did. And maybe that's why there's no immediate remorse. There are no consequences.
Yeah, that's certainly possible. To get back to that main question that we had, I think you're absolutely right to point out that economic anxiety being a rational discussion and racism being an irrational one. I posed it that way on purpose because to make it as polarized as possible, because clearly it's not.
Right.
Is the beginning of the answer, it seems like, right?
Yeah.
Economic anxiety is not purely rational. Nor is racism purely irrational, nor are they polarized.
Exactly.
They're very much symbiotic.
Exactly. And I think not just symbiotic in the sense that I think people, they hear that and they're like, oh, yeah, of course, they both occur at the same time. No. They inform one another.
It's a feedback loop.
Yes. As well as not just racism and economic fears, but all the other isms and all of the other component parts of the network that go into the entirety of a culture. All of those things create this sort of swirling, massive complex of forces that somehow tilted in the direction of the Trump machine.
I saw a map the other day. I can't remember where it was from, but I think it was Chris Hayes who was talking about it. And that the counties that swung from blue to red from 2012 to this election is almost exactly correlative to the counties where white-dominated counties, where drug abuse and deaths from drug abuse have risen.
Wow.
In those same periods. And that's correlation, and you want to be careful about drawing too much from that. But it certainly informs the idea, which is true, that every demographic in this country, slowly but surely, is getting better. Not fast, not as fast as it should be, but there's longer lifespans. There's more access to education. There's more access to healthcare. It's not great, but it's getting better. It's increasing in every demographic except for white males.
So maybe that's what
white males are the only ones who aren't.
Yeah, so
there's more rampant drug use. There's lifespan is actually, I think, either decreasing or rising at a slower level than all the other demographics.
So maybe when we say it was a white lashing, it doesn't simply mean it was this, the deep recesses of our racist selves that came out. I'm sure that there is an element of that is true. I mean, obviously the KKK was given a certain amount of fuel that previously they didn't have, right? But maybe this white lashing is almost better understood as being the expression of genuine fears and anxieties for losing the stronghold or the stranglehold of white supremacy. And we have to be careful with white supremacy, obviously. We mean white privilege. White supremacy, not in the sense of I'm wearing a hood and I'm going to KKK rallies and I've got a
structural stuff.
Structural stuff, yeah. Ideological, structural white supremacy and white privilege.
Yeah, to be clear, this is not white victimhood. This is not saying neither of us are going to say that white males are victims.
No.
Of society anyway. Even the minute loss of privilege that white males have had over the past 10 or 15 years puts them well ahead in terms of opportunity and access than anybody else. It's not even close. We know this both being white males who have had privileges that many of our compatriots in academia have not had.
Right.
So this is obviously true anecdotally and in terms of the data as well. At the same time, talking about the causation here, and that there is some sense in which real anxiety that comes from economic and social losses, or at least gains that are less than they were before, can be thought of as a cause, one cause among many, for this outcome, for racial backlash, without excusing it or saying that it's justified. Because it's definitely not. Those who voted for Trump and think he's going to bring back coal jobs are dead wrong, and they're going to experience it.
Yeah.
And it's going to be interesting to see how they react to that.
Right.
Alongside that, I saw this great graph today that was people were asked if their economic and financial fortunes were better or worse in 2008 compared to now. They were asked the exact same question, except instead of saying 2008 compared to now, it said when Obama was first elected compared to now. So they're given both those questions, or either one of the questions, and just to see how they reacted. And it was overwhelming. Republicans said when Obama's name was mentioned that they were much worse off now than if it was just said 2008, and Democrats the opposite. Said if Obama's name was mentioned, they said they were much better off than if it was just said 2008.
That is so.
There's so much.
That's so telling.
Even in talking about your own financial stability, it's just laden with ideology.
Wow.
You can't even remember how happy you were 8 years ago in an accurate way, depending upon the way the question's asked. Like, that's just, it's incredible.
That is absolutely incredible.
It's all ideology, folks. Give up hope, despair.
Yeah, it is all ideology. I've tried to have a couple of conversations with, I guess I can call him a buddy on Facebook. I've actually never met the dude in person, but we were connected through a mutual friend, and we've been Facebook friends and sparring partners on various topics throughout the years. But I keep trying to talk with him about ideology, and the thing is because he comes from a very sort of classical liberal perspective and a conservative Christian perspective, I think he has a very difficult time understanding what ideology means and the scope of ideological forces that influence or condition thoughts, feelings, actions. He sort of does because he studies linguistics, and so he seems to entertain the idea that there are presuppositions, but I don't know, man. The more that I think about it, the more that I study, the more that I pay attention, the more it becomes overwhelming how fucking deterministic, almost over-determined our lives are because of the forces, the ideological forces that condition our experience in our lives.
So what you're saying is after the election, you just read Spinoza's Ethics and just came to the conclusion it's all going to be all right?
Yeah, exactly. That's my therapy.
Yeah, I should have done the same for sure.
That's my therapy this week moving forward. Yeah. Okay, so I got a question for you. If it is genuinely the case that there is true anxiety that was experienced, true fear that was experienced, and that's what led in large part to voters turning out to vote for a guy who was a demagogue, for lack of a better term, with no experience, who fumbles over his words, who has no understanding of foreign policy, who literally boasted about not knowing the difference between Hamas and Hezbollah, who said that he would learn on the day that he's elected and that he'd know more about it than like anybody else. So how can you vote for that guy? If it is a genuine cry of the oppressed or a cry of the disenfranchised, or at least people who claim to be disenfranchised, what the fuck is wrong with the left that they can't appeal to the disenfranchised? What the fuck is wrong with the left? The left can't organize and win for once. Why is it that even as sort of fractured as the Republican Party is right now, they were still able to salvage a victory, and that there is no left alternative to actually alleviate the cries of the oppressed? What the fuck? What's that about?
Yeah, man, I think it's a really important thing to point out that we're speaking so much about why would someone vote for Trump, but this isn't like a buffet, and you're wondering why someone went for the 5-day-old crab, which had mold growing on it or whatever. There were two options, basically, right? for most people. And you have to look at it as, well, why did they choose one over the other? Not why did they choose one in a vacuum? And it seems like, I mean, I don't know about you, but I've heard so many stories. I know it's just anecdotal evidence, but so many stories about people who said they voted for Trump, even though they know that he's a complete and utter douchebag and a horrible person, and they hate his misogyny, and they think that he's completely unprepared for office and could be disastrous, but that was better than Hillary. Or at least they were angry at Clinton, the Clinton campaign, and the Democratic Party for whatever reason. And as irrational as that is, and as much as they're not even thinking of their own self-interest in that regard, that's got to tell you something, man. I mean, the Clinton campaign took everything for granted. Only basically campaigned on, would you really vote for this guy?
Right.
Basically demeaning anybody who was even thinking about voting for him.
Right.
In the process, implicitly. Just took for granted that certain states that she refused to visit would just vote for her because she's a Democrat and everything else. This should have been in the bag, man. This was playing the Washington Generals. This was the Globetrotters. I mean, any sort of half populist candidate would have smeared him, given how many people voted plugging their nose for Trump. It's a huge failure on the part of the Democratic Party. It's got to be seen as that, first and foremost.
I fully agree. I never like to be the type that's like, told you so or rub it in your nose sort of thing. But I hope that Debbie Wasserman Schultz feels like shit. You know?
You mean her penthouse apartment in New York?
Yeah, she probably doesn't give a fuck. But I hope that there's a sense in which people are really evaluating. I hope people are awakened from their slumbers, that they realize that you can't just simply live on the side of your own institutional interests, and you can't turn a blind eye to momentum. And when you get somebody like a Bernie Sanders, and I don't want to just be like a sort of Bernie bro who's standing, hindsight saying that he would have crushed Trump, but he probably would have. But I just hope that moving forward, that the left, whatever that means in the United States, even though there's no real left, will be able to sort of galvanize around this failure and really pick up the pieces, like actually be fractured, feel that they're fractured, not just put a Band-Aid over it and not admit that they really, 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 really fucked up, but be fractured, feel the fracture, experience the fracture, and then rebuild in a way that will galvanize a genuine leftist movement, a genuine semi-cohesive, not even cohesive, but semi-cohesive platform that can actually combat the ills of economic inequality and climate change and racial inequality and all the various issues that are facing identity politics and things like that. Because that is possible. That is possible. I would argue, I think it should start from economics, but hopefully they can pick up the pieces and do so. And I hope that people feel like shit. And I really want them to feel it. Not in a sense that like, oh, I hope you feel bad and I hope you're pouting in a corner. But like, I do hope that they feel it so that they will learn and that we can actually put something together moving forward.
Yeah, they need to feel we messed up.
Yes.
We royally fucked up. They need to feel that, and they need to know that the establishment is the one that did it. Progressives didn't do it. Third parties didn't do it. It was the establishment that did it to itself. They assumed that demographics would mean that they would win, and that their horrible, fractured opposition would mean that they would win automatically by default. And they didn't do the work necessary, and then they got their asses handed to them. And it's not looking good in the future, man. 2018, what is it? Way more Democratic incumbents or seats are up for grabs, and only a few Republicans. So
what do you have to have in this?
Impossible
What do you have to have
have
a supermajority?
It's 60, right?
60
in the Senate.
Okay. Well, is that?
But I mean,
is
that might
a
not be the case
possibility?
in 2018. I think it's not even a possibility unless they literally win every single Republican seat and don't lose any Democratic seats. And with the gerrymandering in the House, they're not going to win that either. It's not looking good for a lame duck last 2 years for Trump. Looks like he's going to get at least all 4 years with both houses with him and the Supreme Court, which is scary.
Yeah.
That said, Trump will come out with a $1 billion stimulus plan, revive the economy, not do anything. on immigration and then be the greatest president we've ever had. So who knows?
I know. Can you imagine? Can you fucking imagine? I actually said that on Facebook because he had previously stated that he wanted to turn the Republican Party into the Workers' Party. And could you imagine if he does? He comes out with an infrastructure plan, and he builds like a high-speed rail or some shit like that connects all the major cities, manufacturing jobs, stimulates the economy, and the Republican Party. Obviously, then it gets 4 years. He gets reelected, 8 years. He doesn't actually build a wall. He's not going to build a wall. They're backtracking already. Obviously, that was just rhetoric. Any fucking sane person knew he wasn't going to build a wall, that he was just saying shit to kind of like feed the beast that was in the audience. But yeah, what if he does become this like crazy fucking moderate candidate? Is that even worse though, if that's the case?
Yeah, I was thinking the other day, the scariest thing is we don't have anybody in American electoral politics who is fiscally liberal and socially conservative. That's just like no one exists in that quadrant. We have lots of people. The progressives are on the left on both issues, fiscal and socially. Obviously, we have the Tea Party on the right on both sides, both those issues, fiscally and socially. We have lots of blue dogs who are fiscally conservative and socially liberal, but almost no one occupies the invert of that. What if Trump is that? What if he's fiscally super liberal? Tons of stimulus, infrastructure plans, output gap. I saw some Trump strategists talking about the multiplier effect. Like, what the hell? There's straight up Keynesian economics going on in some of Trump's strategist conversation here. What if he's totally fiscally liberal and then also does just the most terrible, nefarious stuff on immigration, deports millions of immigrants, bans Muslims,
gives power back to the states for Roe v. Wade.
Yeah, massive hate crimes everywhere in the country, and the DOJ refuses to prosecute it or whatever. Like, that's like the nightmare scenario, right? The economy is great, but then we have just social unrest everywhere. Which, of course, I mean, unironically, that's exactly what happened in 1930s in Germany, right? Hitler saves the economy, massive stimulus, builds bridges, trains run on time, but then we're also going to gas 6 million Jews. But everyone will shut up because the economy's better.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting. I think that the crazy thing that's so interesting is that we don't know, and people keep saying that he's a wild card, and we were talking about this before we started recording, and I think the reason that he's a wild card is because, like the title of his book said, all he cares about is the art of the deal. He just has a goal, and his goal was to be president. And so in order to become president, what do? You do whatever the fuck you need to do in order to win. Just like if you're trying to take over that business or you want to start a golf course here, you do whatever the fuck you need to do. You pull permits, you bribe politicians, you hire cheap laborers so that you can maximize your profit. You do whatever you need to do so that you can get your end product. Same thing with this. You chant about how you're going to build a wall and then, and I'm going to make Mexico pay for it. And people are like, are you going to accept the conclusions of the election? And he's like, yeah, I'll accept them if I win. I mean, it's total like WWE showmanship, right? He's doing what he can do to rabble rouse. And he was able to, really motivate people and get them behind something. Just hooping and hollering with this sensationalistic kind of showmanship. And I wonder if he's going to have that same sort of approach as a president. And then even if that's the case, is he going to be able to be effective? And are we going to see the actual limits of what a president can do now, really? Based on the fact that we have a system of checks and balances, based on the fact that we have teams of people within the executive branch that are doing things, that you sort of designate responsibility to. And so are we going to see him being the ultimate manager? I mean, what the fuck are we going to see? Well, we don't really know. But what I do think we're going to see is that he's going to be consistently inconsistent. That he's going to just simply be seeking to make deals in the sense that he's a businessman, and whatever he needs to do, he's going to make compromises with Democrats. He's going to work with Republicans. He's going to betray a lot of the things he stated on the campaign simply so that he can get things done. He's going to sometimes maybe dip his toes in the pools of the sort of darker side of the isms, of the racist rhetoric and some maybe poor decisions on climate change and environmental policy. So I think he's going to kind of just be all over the fucking board. I really do think so. And that's what's going to be really
interesting.
interesting.
And by that, do you mean Mike Pence?
Yeah, exactly.
Because he's going to be at Trump Tower most of the time, hanging out in a pool with some Playboy models.
Yeah, I did hear about that. As I said, he might not even move into the White House.
A couple days a week, maybe at most.
Yeah.
Doesn't really fit his aesthetic.
Well, then here's what's worse. So if he is doing that, and he does, because he has said that he's going to rely heavily on policy construction and legislation, he's going to rely heavily on Mike Pence, right? So here's the thing. So he sets up his cabinet. He's got Steve Bannon as his chief strategist. He's got that, what's his name? Reince Priebus.
Priebus.
As his chief of staff. He's going to have Pence overseeing the transition. He's got Rudy Giuliani as Secretary of State. He might have that weird Sheriff David Clark dude somewhere on his team, Attorney General or some shit like that. Yeah.
Hey, Carson dropped out from being the Department of Education guy.
So that's good.
We're not going to get arrested for left-wing propaganda at universities. At least not yet.
It's interesting to see the team that he creates. Obviously, the person that he has on the head of his transition team for the EPA. I can't remember the dude's name, Ebel or whatever. But the guy that's like the sort of Darth Vader of the climate change world that just completely denies climate change. Sarah Palin might be, what is the Secretary of the Interior? And I just watched.
I didn't hear that.
Yeah, dude. And I heard her the other day saying that she would love the job, and that she's like, and we've got all these God-given resources on this planet, and so we're gonna drill, and we're gonna. It's like, oh my god,
dude, they're gonna make gas prices like 50 cents a gallon by literally opening up all the reserves, wasting them all. Everything's gone.
But it doesn't matter, man, because the rapture's coming, so fuck it. But it's gonna be really interesting to see how he actually presidents. How does he do the president?
I feel like if we're going to end on something, I think the idea is we don't really know what's going to happen. We're not even totally sure what just did happen,
right?
Let alone what's going to happen. And so the key watchword is to be vigilant, be paying attention, be as into the news, be as willing to talk about it with anyone you come across as you are right now over the next 4 years. And I'm actually strangely kind of hopeful about that. If there's anything to be hopeful about, it's that people are way more engaged now than they would have been if Clinton had won and the status quo had remained. People would have been apathetic. I would have preferred that, even as a white person, let alone having to be born, like wake up and be black or Latino or a Muslim in America under a Trump presidency. But at the same time, the one possible good thing that come out of this is that people are more engaged, especially young people. I had students come to class today and fuck Donald Trump t-shirts that they made themselves.
Wow.
And there were protests at campus, and the cops had to come, and Trump supporters and protesters got into fights.
Wow.
I was like, fuck yeah, this is awesome. I didn't say that because I get in trouble. But in my heart of hearts, I was saying that because this means, they are engaged.
And this is in a conservative part of Southern California, too.
Well, this was at a different campus, but yeah.
Oh, is that? Okay, yeah, okay. I know
at the conservative part where I am, there's nothing.
Oh, okay.
But I expected that.
Yeah.
That's interesting. It's mostly minority students, but
right.
they totally get it, and I'm so proud of them. Like, I was so happy to see that. If there's anything that can get millennials engaged into politics and maybe even vote in the midterms, this could have been it, and I'm really hoping that it is.
Well, this is the very thing that Susan Sarandon said that she got all that backlash about a few months back, right? She said, well, maybe it would be better if Trump does win because then the revolution will start. Now, obviously, people throw that word revolution around quite a bit, but this is what I wonder. Because I kind of made this point on our live podcast. I said, yeah, theoretically it sounds great. Let's watch the world burn. That's great. And then we can rebuild it afresh. But in real material terms, that means human beings die or human beings suffer. So if in the end, this somehow galvanizes a genuine leftist movement and 10, 15, 20, 40 years from now, we can look back and you can say that the election of Trump and the sort of fallout of the crisis of the white male working class in America led to these genuine movements. But you have to go through some birth pangs in the process. Is it worth it? Or is that type of logic, that means end logic, is that a sort of dangerous way to sort of view history? That historicism, is that dangerous?
Yeah, to be at the point where literal revolution is the best step means you're basically saying nothing is better than something at this point. And I mean, I don't know, but would you agree that we're definitely not at that point? Or
No,
is better than something?
definitely not.
I mean, you can see a through line where you get to a better world in 10 years, where the Progressive Caucus gains the Democratic Party and becomes the leaders of the Democratic Party, which is already could happen as early as like next year, if say Keith Ellison wins the chairmanship at the DNC, and then the rest of the Democratic Party falls behind Sanders and Warren in the Senate. You could see that happening very quickly, and it very well may happen. And then, you know, Democrats probably won't get anything in 2018, but in 2020, maybe they get their presidential candidate in. They do well. By 2022, 2024, you could have the exact opposite of what's happening right now. And progressives could be leading the country. It's not likely, but you can see it as a possibility. It's not like completely absent from potential worlds. And unless it's completely absent, then you can't really talk about like literal pitchforks and revolution stuff, right?
Of course.
Even Sanders is talking about our revolution. And he's talking about it in the sense of just change.
Engagement.
Yeah, the revolution comes at the level of the people. They change their minds. They have a revolution of their thinking. You want to have a country that's for everybody, has different policies, that kind of stuff.
Right. Well, I will say this. I've asked a couple of people, and I'm going to say it publicly now on, I guess probably one of the bigger platforms that I would have, and I've been trying to talk to people on social media about it, is I really do want to commit myself to engagement moving forward. It's really easy as people who, are trying to do research or make movies or the various projects that you and I and our friends are engaged with and whatnot. It's very easy to find those comfortable places where we can speak from. And I think, and I hope this isn't just empty words, because I feel this really at a visceral level in my heart of hearts, so to speak, that I really don't want to in any way be apathetic. And what I do want is I want to have a sort of fire that is burning within to actually really substantially, proactively be involved at a community level, at an academic level, whatever it is that I can do to as great a degree as possible. I want to be engaged moving forward. And I really do. I'm committing myself or recommitting myself to causes of fighting inequality wherever it is, fighting oppression, fighting alienation, wherever it is. Just recently, I inquired to try to join the Anti-Austerity Alliance and People Before Profits here in Ireland, which there's a protest on Thursday, actually, to protest against Donald Trump Thursday night at the American Embassy here in Dublin, and I'm going to go. Not that I think that I can maybe be involved entirely with everything that AAA and PBP are doing here in Dublin or in Ireland, but they're doing stuff that is transnational as well, and I can learn from them, and I want to stand in solidarity with these movements and learn from various people that are really fucking engaging at an active level, and I want to commit myself to that. I really want to commit myself to that, and I hope fucking people. I feel like by saying it out loud to people that I care about, like you, and to Michael, and to anyone else that's listening that knows me on a personal level, that you guys will hold me accountable to that, and that if I maybe by saying it, I kind of like have to now commit myself to it, by saying it, it's like it's out there now, and it'll be sort of immortalized in the interwebs. So I must do it, or I'm betraying my own words, and I don't want to do that. So I'm really hoping to commit myself to activism engagement moving forward.
Yeah, engagement is a feedback loop, right? Every little thing you do affects those around you, shows how engaged you are. They get inspired by it. They start thinking about the same issues you're talking about, and they do it to others. And it constantly grows that way. It only dies when everyone together just kind of stops and becomes apathetic. Yeah. So whatever your form of engagement is, if it's calling your representatives, if you're in states where this is going to be an important issue, especially in states where immigration is going to be an important issue, if it means going to protests, if it means just talking to people, showing that you care, especially if there's someone who's going to probably be suffering from policies that will be enacted over the next 4 years, all that stuff is important. It really helps. So anything you do is going to be good, even if it's small.
Hear, hear.
Jesus loves every act of rebellion. No matter how small, it's still beautiful. Like a small burning Molotov cocktail.
Yeah, and voting for Trump is not an act of rebellion that Jesus loves. So not that one. That's the one act that he doesn't love.
Yeah, electing a guy who lives in a giant tower with his golden-plated name on the front is not rebellion. All right, so our next segment is the sticky leaves, and man, this is a challenging week to have a sticky leaf, so I'm glad you had it this week. Austin, what in the world actually gave you meaning this week of all weeks?
Yeah, so I'm going to do a sticky leaf, but I want to ask your opinion on something, because it's something I have had conflict in my own life about for a few years now. So as anybody knows, and as Troy, you know, I am presently in Dublin, Ireland. And a few weeks ago, I did a sticky leaf about, Guinness in Ireland and like reading books and shit like that while I'm having a few pints. And that's great. Well, my sticky leaf this week is another sort of regional specificity. And it has to do with a sport called mixed martial arts and a particular fighter by the name of Conor McGregor, who is from Dublin. And he is the biggest fighter probably in the history of the sport of mixed martial arts. Now, a lot of people don't know mixed martial arts. They just think of UFC, right? UFC is the biggest promotion in the sport of mixed martial arts. It's the Ultimate Fighting Championship, right? Conor McGregor is the featherweight champion, and this past weekend, he had a chance to become the first ever two weight class title holder. Now, other people have held titles, but not simultaneously. So he's had a chance to become the first ever simultaneous two weight class title holder in the UFC, which was a crazy huge accomplishment, right? Now, what is crazy is that in Dublin, Ireland, which is where Conor McGregor is from, he is a local god. And, the fights take place in the United States. And so his fights don't usually take place until 5 o'clock in the morning here. So the bars all stay open well past the curfew, well past the legal operating hours. And the cops just kind of turn a blind eye and they allow people to drink until 6, 7 o'clock in the morning on the nights that he's fighting, right? So I actually went out to a bar on this past Saturday. I got there at about 1 o'clock in the morning, and I watched some of the prelims, and then I watched it all the way through to the main event. The main event started at around 5 or 5:30 in the morning, local time here in Ireland, and I watched him absolutely dismantle the lightweight champion at the time, and he became the first ever two-division weight class simultaneous title holder. And let me just tell you, I have never seen a bar explode with exuberance for any sporting event, whether it's Super Bowl. Now, Chicago Cubs winning the World Series, I wasn't in Chicago, but I've seen like pictures and stuff like that. I bet you it was a similar sort of jouissance. It seems like just this massive exuberance. I mean, Chicago Cubs, I don't think you probably can't match that because that's like once in a fucking century, literally. But there was a very sort of crazy, palpable energy. And it was kind of amazing to experience that. And that was actually why I went to the bar. I could have just stayed at home. I mean, I enjoy the sport of mixed martial arts. I have trained in Muay Thai and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And when I was a kid, I trained in Judo for, years off and on. And so I do enjoy the sport. I've enjoyed training in the sport and competing at obviously very low levels, not in any way at a professional level. I got to protect the moneymaker after all. But, I've enjoyed competing. And so I was like, I'm going to go and I'm going to throw myself into this sort of local experience, this once-in-a-lifetime experience. And this was also, I forgot to mention, this is the biggest card ever assembled in UFC history because it was the first time that New York hosted an event. MMA had been illegal in New York because of all various political reasons. But it was the first event, and it was held in Madison Square Garden, and Madison Square Garden has just like a crazy pugilistic history with boxing matches with Ali and Frazier, and of course it's the Garden, so concerts and some of the most amazing basketball games that have ever taken place, hockey games, etc., right? So it was absolutely amazing. A fucking amazing experience. I'm so glad I went. Totally surreal. But then here's my thing, Troy. I am, in some ways, I'm a pacifist. So militaristically, I'm a pacifist. I'm not a passivist, like I'm not passive, Passive, but pacifist, as in peace. I'm not a military interventionist. I don't like war. I don't like street fights. But at the same time, I like competition. And I still have that like weird man juice thing where it's like, yeah, men, we're strong, and women too. But I mean, it's like dominating another human. That's a thing that is interesting to me. Is this a conflict? Am I a tortured soul because I like to watch people punch each other and kick each other and knee each other and elbow each other in the face and then submit each other and break arms and shit like that? And then at the same time, I want to claim for being, towards like sort of like leftist ideals to creating equitable communities and things like that. Am I a total hypocrite?
Well, yes.
Okay.
No, I mean, I don't even know how to answer that question. I mean, you could go down, like just spitballing here.
Yeah.
Theoretically, couldn't you go down the aisle of having sort of competition that is violent in a way replaces or subverts or redirects the violent impulses we have from being elsewhere? I know people make that argument about sports, like, we have fewer wars now because sports gets out a lot of those testosterone fueled needs for violence, whatever. Like,
yeah, but we also don't have a revolutionary fervor because we have sports.
Yeah, it's also true. Yeah, I think it's a stupid argument, but you could make that argument, right? That in a sense, like, hey, if we get to have controlled violence where nobody dies and everyone's consenting and can even win prizes, that's much better than like, dogfighting.
Here's my only problem
with humans.
Here's my only problem. In the bar, 3 fights broke out. So
this is Ireland, so how many more fights would there have been otherwise?
Yeah, right.
Probably twice as many.
That's a good point. That's a fair point. That is a fair point. Yeah. But that's the problem too, is right, you watch a bunch of, people on screen, men and women who are fighting and their testosterone is juiced to the gills, and then you're like, oh, I'm tough, I'm gonna fight, and then someone looks at you wrong and they bump into you and you've had a few pints and then you start fighting because you think that you're a badass too. And so there's like this negative empathic connection.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, You're asking the wrong person, dude. I'm so biased. Like, I hate football and boxing, and I get that MMA is much more, would I be correct in saying it's much more skill-oriented than other more physically violent sports like that?
I mean,
like a boxing or a wrestling?
Well, the thing is, it incorporates all of those things. So it's not that it's more technical, because those things are technically precise, but within sort of more limited disciplines, whereas mixed martial arts is broader in its disciplinary outlook. And some people would actually say it's actually less technical because when you incorporate more disciplines, you can't master the individual disciplines. But then that's when mixed martial arts itself became a discipline, Like, so rather than mixed martial arts just being the combining of other disciplines, mixed martial arts itself has become a discipline. So it is very technically precise, and technicality is important, but yeah, I don't know if I could say that. Yeah.
I think you should just look deeply into your soul, Austin, and you'll realize that basketball has everything you need.
Oh, Jesus.
It's the beautiful game.
Yo, when we were in undergrad, I actually went through like a crisis because that's when I was actually training really hard at one point with a bunch of people when I first got to our to masters, and then I had like a guilty conscience for a little bit where I felt that like Jesus would not approve of me wanting to punch people in the face and choke them out, and so I think I still have a little bit of that guilty conscience. I still have.
What did Jesus do when he cleansed the temple? Didn't he do some judo shit in there?
That's what I heard. That's what I figured. I just watched the Gospel According to St. Matthew for the I Dig This Movie podcast. And yeah, he definitely does some judo shit. But I will say this, conflictual essence aside, because I do often refer to myself as a walking contradiction, and I think all of us obviously are walking contradictions, but I sort of boast in that fact in some ways. But I will say this, it was absolutely an amazing experience to be able to experience a local hero achieving something at the height of, athletic dominance in the hometown where this person is revered. It was fucking surreal, man. It didn't give me hope in the world. It didn't give me any sort of like, renewed faith that we're going to be okay after the Trumpocalypse. But it did, take my mind off of things. And I will say that I think it was part of my healing process this week. after really not knowing what to think after the election and feeling a bit down. And, I didn't go to a state of depression, but I did go into a fog for a couple of days afterwards. And it was more just because I didn't know what to think. I didn't know how to think. It didn't seem real. And then all I could do was observe the bile that was being spit all over the various social media outlets. And then all of I just immersed myself in I don't know why I did this, but I immersed myself in news commentary and things like that. It was just so interesting to see despair in a country that is otherwise extremely comfortable. And I think for me, going to this event and seeing the sort of exuberance of this crowd, it really did actually kind of give me those happy chemicals that I think kind of contributed to me being in a better place now and sort of being hopeful and optimistic, like you said at the end of the last segment, moving forward. So that's my sticky leaves. Maybe you find solace in the most unlikely places. And for me, it was in the place of an Irishman and a bunch of drunken Irishmen, enjoying pugilism and punching people in the face. And Conor McGregor, congratulations. You punched him in the face very well.
Yeah, dude. I mean, on a Wednesday after the whole thing, I went for dinner and got some In-N-Out. I got double animal fries and a chocolate shake, and I pounded that thing like never before, and I felt like shit afterwards. But it was great.
Absolutely.
It was and I feel like this is what we're talking about. This last week was so terrible, we all kind of needed to punch them right in the face, in our own way. Mine was to stuff myself full of terrible artery clogging goodness. Yours was to hang out with a bunch of drunk fucks punching each other. It's all the same.
Yeah. All right. I dig it. That's my sticky leaves. Sticky leaves, over, out.
All right, so our next segment is bullshitting. And for this week, we decided to do a little something creative, I guess. And by creative, I mean copying something on the internet. And that on Twitter, there was a Dear Liberals. It wasn't even a hashtag, it was just Dear Liberals trending topic. It was mostly full of people who had voted for Trump or supported Trump being extremely obnoxious, which is not unique to them. I know that that's the case. But being very obnoxious about Trump having won, even though basically everybody had counted him out, present company included, and all that. And so, got to kind of let them have their fun a little bit. It was obnoxious and we call it out, but whatever. I felt it's kind of interesting. Maybe, what if the left did this? What if we had a Dear Liberals? What are some pithy, short little aphoristic tweets length things we think that liberals need to learn? We got a few of them, each of us here. And I feel like we can just go back and forth saying them and maybe reacting if we feel they need to.
Yeah. So two of mine they have a sort of substantive cut to them. And then one of them is just completely superficial. So I'll start with the superficial one.
Okay.
Dear liberals, I'm sorry that you don't get to see Kate McKinnon on SNL playing Hillary Clinton every single week.
Are you sure you won't see it every single week? I feel like they might just do it just to pretend things are better.
Yeah, I don't know. It's so interesting how late night television and how comedians just completely became biased on television around Hillary Clinton. I've never seen that before in any sort of election at all. I mean, you have not just Saturday Night Live, but you have Late Night with Seth Meyers. The only person who didn't was, what's his face? Jimmy, how do I forget his name right now?
Fallon?
Thank you. Jimmy Fallon, who actually had Trump on his show. But every single other late night talk show host, they pretty much were committed to slating Donald Trump. It was really interesting, wasn't it? I've never seen that before.
Yeah, also fuck all of them, but true.
Yeah.
Except for Seth Meyers, I kind of like him. My first one is I never want to hear about Harry Potter again.
No,
Dear liberals, stop making
Voldemort
political
references?
Analogies with Harry Potter. It's the dumbest fucking thing I've ever heard. Don't do it.
Yeah. I know I saw one today that was Trump's chief of staff is Voldemort. I know.
Or isn't
By the way,
Voldemort and that's somebody else? I don't even know.
I don't know.
Just
By the way,
stop it. Stop.
This isn't Dear Liberals. Can we just say kudos to those Joe Biden memes?
Oh, they're wonderful.
Oh my
Wonderful.
God.
They
Yeah,
made the darkness just kind of creep away for a few minutes.
That's the country's sticky leaves.
Joe Biden has been a sticky leaf these last 4 years. I'm more upset about not having Joe Biden in my life anymore than probably anything else.
Oh, God. All right, here's my next one. Dear liberals, how about next time don't be anti-Semitic red scaremongers and just go with the socialist Jew?
Fuck yes. Dear liberals, no one likes Lena Dunham. Stop it.
Yeah. All right, and here's my last one. Dear liberals, economics, not identity politics.
Oh, you're going to get some backlash for that one.
Yeah.
Dear liberals, don't ever call an argument a destruction.
Oh, that's a good
Please.
point. Yeah.
I never want to hear that John Oliver destroyed somebody who then becomes president a couple of months later. No,
Yeah.
if he became president, he was not destroyed.
Maybe he became president because you guys made a concerted effort to destroy him.
Yeah, it's so the failure of the destruction. Certainly was a construction,
Yeah, it
unwittingly.
was. All right, you got more?
I got another one.
Okay.
Dear liberals, avocados are good. I get it.
Who's hating on what are they like talking about how much they love avocados?
Everybody does. I feel like that's all I hear. I feel like everyone thought the world was ending, so we decided to just cram avocados down our throats.
Yeah, that's true. Is everyone going on the ketogenic diet now? Is that what it is? Just high fats, lots of avocados, lots of nuts. Yeah.
Like, I'm in California. I feel like, I don't know, maybe it's just the confirmation bias, but I just see the last couple of weeks, avocados are just anyone talks about. The whole world is just avocados. I get it. They're good. I like them too.
I got a little quick breakfast recipe for you. You ready? You take an avocado, you cut it in half, you take the nut out, right? And then you take the spoon, and you know how you've got like a little bit of a hole in there? Take the spoon out and carve it out a little bit. Now, this is for those of you who are not on a full plant-based diet. So if you eat eggs, right? You take a little spoon and you carve out a little bit of a hole. And so you've got your avocado with the skin still on it underneath, and you've got like a larger hole than you would have if you just kind of removed the nut. Take an egg, crack the egg, and put it inside the hole of the avocado. Sprinkle a little cheese over it, whatever cheese is your favorite, like a spicy cheese or something like that is really good. Then sprinkle a little paprika on it. Now do this with multiple avocados. Obviously, you have two halves, so you can have two of those. You have 2 eggs, avocado, cheese, and paprika. You can do it with a couple of them. Stick it in the oven. Bake it for about 7 to 10 minutes. Boom. Quick, easy, healthy, good fats, good protein breakfast. You're welcome.
That sounds pretty good.
It's actually really fucking good.
Okay, but stop it. I said avocados are good. We're done. Okay, I got one more.
Okay.
This is going to be a little bit more deep, so it's good this was going last. Dear liberals, irony is not a political program.
Ooh.
Drop
That was
the
a
fucking
challenge.
mic.
That was a challenge.
Drop it. We out. Oh, no, we're not out. We got This Week in Hip Hop coming up next.
Michael, what up?
With first-class legroom, free cocktails for everyone, and a schedule you can depend on.
Hey, what's up? It's This Week in Hip Hop. It's Michael Burns. It's Owls at Dawn. Good to be here with you all. Sorry for missing out last week. I didn't have the stamina or the emotional fortitude to stay up and talk to the guys in the various gang about the election. How fucking depressing is that? It still sucks. Hopefully everyone's coming out the other side of that election. And hopefully, I don't mean to be corny right here, hopefully you guys are finding rap useful. I don't know. For me, listening to good music has genuinely got me through this week. The morning after the election, I don't know why it ended up being this, but I was listening to the recent Jeezy project. I think it's what, Trap or Die 3. I have no idea why I was listening to that, but having something just really intense and angry and hard, I don't know, help channel some stuff. And I was listening to some Dead Prez later in the day. Then I went back to some songs off the Black Star record, in particular Respiration I listened to a few times. So find the stuff that helps you right now, and I hope you find it. Random mention, and my friend Will pushed me to talk about this, but I never talked about Still Brazy, the YG record that came out over the summer. I don't think I talked about it on the podcast. You didn't listen to that record. There's a song on it. It's called FDT, which stands for Fuck Donald Trump. If you haven't heard that, I'm sure you have at this point, but it's really cathartic right now to hear that song. I actually got a crowd of people at a comedy night to sing that over the weekend, and it was the happiest I felt since the election. And I know, like, yelling things like fuck Donald Trump, it's just symbolic, and it's just a way to express anger, and we have so much work to do. But let yourself have those moments. And And you can find that video on my Twitter if you want to see it. So we'll talk about a few things right now. I'm going to tell you one thing I'm not going to talk about today. I'm not going to talk about the Tribe record because Austin and Troy have been nice enough to let me record a separate episode that we'll be posting later this week where I'm just going to talk about the Tribe record. So here's what I do want to talk about. Since I've last spoken with you, Common had a new record come out. It's called Black America Again. It's really good. I've gotten in more trouble for defending Common the past few years than anything else. It's been my most controversial opinion. And I love Common because I'm someone that's originally from the Midwest, the Chicago area to be in specific. And for a lot of years, the Midwest didn't get a lot of hype in hip hop. Growing up in the 90s and early 2000s, it was basically all New York or LA with a little bit of the South creeping in. And Chicago really was like Chi-Town's Nas. And Common his first 3 albums are just classics. And then he had this sort of career resuscitation with Kanye. And then he put out a couple records that just kind of sucked. And I'll be honest, they're bad. There's some bad dad rap bars, some bad production, some bad choices. Not on this one. Lyrically, Common is sounding as good as ever. He still has some of those really corny Common bars, which if you've been listening to him for long enough, you've learned to accept. They're there. But it's politically poignant. He says some very real things in a very real way, but mostly it's the music on this. So he has Kareem Riggins and Robert Glasper on production. If you don't know who Kareem Riggins and Robert Glasper are, you should. If you like hip hop, if you like jazz, and if you like sort of musicians that are influenced by Dilla and are taking the production style from the greatest into the studio with their instruments, you should know these dudes. But I really recommend the record. Some good features. Sid the Kid is on a couple tracks. But yeah, Black America Again by Common, his best record since I'd say B. So check it out. Another record that came out this week, also a Chicago artist, Vic Spencer. You might know Vic Spencer through a little back and forth beef he had with Mick Jenkins this year. He's sort of like, if the contemporary Chicago scene is the standard world in Stranger Things, like Vic Spencer is the evil dude from the Upside Down. He's older than a lot of the guys out in Chicago right now. And he's just a really hard street rapper. He makes it very clear that some of his influences are people like the late, great Sean Price and Redman. He has that classic East Coast style. He's aggressive with his flows, and he clearly gives zero fucks. He says things that border on the offensive. But I don't know. I think in terms of just like straight bars, I think he's the best rapper in Chicago right now. Don't at me, please. But the record's called St. Gregory. Has a lot of tracks on it, and it's very loopy. Like a lot of the songs are 1.5 to 2 minutes. The production style reminds me a lot of kind of like older Alchemist type stuff. All sample based, all loopy, all head nodding. A lot of these songs do not have choruses. It's just like grimy loops and really hard bars for an hour. I think less than an hour. So give that a listen. I think it's definitely worth your time. And if you have a proclivity towards kind of East Coast street rap, I think you're going to like it. And it's nice that you have that balance. A lot of the recent wave in Chicago rap has been more experimental, psychedelic, gospel-based, very socially conscious. It's nice to have someone like Vic Spencer that just says a bunch of raw shit. And he's an interesting backstory. A guy that grew up in a group home, had a pretty rough life. And on the record, there's some conversations with, I think it's one of his teachers, just kind of talking about like what he was like growing up, where he's come as a person. And I think it's cool. Definitely an underdog story. But Vic Spencer, St. Gregory, it's on all the streaming services, but buy it as well. Check it out. Last thing that came out, Rhapsody came out with a new EP this week. Rhapsody, who's now a member of Rock Nation. The EP is called Crown. I only had a chance to do one listen. It was really good. I'm going to listen to it again. There's features from Anderson .Paak, who's just on everything. Like anything that he's on has been awesome. But if he does not own 2016, I don't know who does. Ab Soul is featured on it as well. Just another really strong project. It's something you can stream for free. It's something that's good to listen to. It's something that you might need right now. I think that's all from me. I'm gonna keep it short and sweet. But keep your heads up. Let yourself feel shitty. Let yourself feel angry. But I hope right now everyone is thinking about what they can do to contribute to making the world not as shitty as it is, and can contribute to making America a country that is not run by just an odious racist piece of shit. So let's stand together and do that. And then check back in a few days. You're going to hear me talk about the Tribe record. Spoiler alert, I think it's fucking incredible. So hit me up on Twitter as always. Tell me stuff you want me to talk about. Enjoy the whole podcast. I'll catch y'all later. Bye.
Cruising the sky as smoothly as a bird, you scarcely realize you are traveling fast.
All right, sweet. Thank you, Michael. As he said, he will be releasing a separate episode this week to chat about the Tribe album, which I know Troy is excited to hear about, and apparently it's going to be their first #1 album in like 20 years, maybe, or something like that. So,
Oh, I didn't even know that.
yeah. So I just read a headline on that a little bit ago. But until then, you got recommendations. I'm definitely going to check out the new Common album because I dig me some Common. So I'm definitely going to be checking that one out.
I mean, I feel like I need to go back and listen to some of Common's old records because when I got interested in hip hop, Common was, like Mike was talking about, like straight up dad rap.
Right.
And it's like the yacht rock of rap, right? And
Yeah.
I couldn't deal with that. But I feel like I've always heard, B and Like Water for Chocolate are supposed to be classics, so I gotta go back.
Faux show. Well, yeah, anything else you want to say in wrapping up this episode? I'm actually really glad that Michael sort of, without us even coordinating, said something very similar to what we were saying at the end, where I was talking about mixed martial arts being my sort of happy pill and In and Out being your happy pill. For him, it was like hard hip-hop music. I feel like everybody that is at least tangentially related to the left is in need of some sort of injection of dopamine.
Yeah, there's two kind of polar like hangover cures for this experience. One is that the dopamine rush from whatever source you get it from, and the second is the fuck Donald Trump, FDT. You got to get the anger out a little bit, the visceral, experience. Just let it out, release. I did that last night
That's right.
through ways which I will not advertise on the episode. And I don't know, how do you get that out?
I'm going to an orgy tonight, so that's all I'm doing. On that note, later, guys.
Yeah, okay. До свидания, Amerikanski.